Big news over the weekend with El Salvador accepting a $1.3 billion loan from the IMF. Is El Salvador scaling back their support for Bitcoin? Or is this Nayib Bukele playing 5D chess and employing the Michael Saylor handbook in order to use government-issued debt, or in this case, IMF-issued debt, to buy Bitcoin? Welcome back, everyone. This weekend was pretty eventful, wasn't it? I know that a lot of people are waiting on the Microsoft news to see whether the board of directors is going to approve the share repurchase. Sorry, not the share repurchase, is going to approve Microsoft adding Bitcoin to its balance sheet. I highly doubt that's going to happen, but you never know. We'll see. But I do think the market has already priced in that Microsoft is not going to do this. In other news as well is Amazon. It seems that and I don't know how true this is. I'm going to do some digging on it, and I'm probably going to do a separate clip. But it seems like Amazon might be warming up to having Bitcoin as as one of their treasury holdings. So that could be very interesting. But today, the big story is El Salvador and Nayib Bukele, and seemingly the IMF being able to provide enough money so that El Salvador kind of peels back its Bitcoin legal tender laws. And essentially what is being asked by the IMF is that businesses are not forced to accept Bitcoin as legal tender. Okay. More specifically, that they are not forced to accept Bitcoin as payment. So the legal tender law, so to speak, would not actually be impacted, but the businesses would no longer be required to accept Bitcoin. Some people might be outraged. Some people might think Nayib Bukele is, he just, maybe he's a salesman and he just did what he had to do to be able to get that money from the IMF. But in all fairness, based on what I've seen from him in the past, I don't feel that he is an IMF fanboy. I don't think he really cares. And to a certain extent, I do believe that he is, and El Salvador is going to use that $1.3 billion to purchase Bitcoin. Now, some people may not know this. El Salvador has been purchasing 1 Bitcoin every single day with this new money from the IMF that, to me, and I mean, obviously, I don't have any deep insight into the economics of El Salvador, but it seems to me that El Salvador didn't really need this money. And what's also interesting is about 2 weeks ago, there's been some a renewed conversation about El Salvador removing its ban on gold mining. Now, what's very interesting here, right? Let's take a look at the sequence of events, right? El Salvador mentioned. So first, let's back up. The IMF since 2021, since El Salvador has made Bitcoin legal tender, since 2021, the IMF has been attacking El Salvador. The IMF has been framing El Salvador as a country that is going to collapse and have major uncertainty due to its adoption of Bitcoin. Okay, so this is no surprise. So now we know that many countries hold gold. The United States being the number one country that holds the most gold, followed by Germany, Italy, France, Russia, China, Switzerland. Okay, so we get the picture, right? We get it. Lots of countries hold gold. Now, what would it mean if El Salvador were to lift its ban on gold mining? Nayib Bukele specifically made a comment saying studies carried out in only 4% of the potential area identified 50 million ounces of gold, valued today at $131 billion. Okay, so that is a very small sampling from El Salvador. And what does that mean? Could that mean that if there's a massive flood of gold onto the market, that gold might see a massive repricing, right? Could there be a huge dip in the gold price? Because, see, that's the thing, right? Bitcoin only has 21 million. And if you really want to get into it, it's 20.999999999 whatever. Okay, so there isn't even actually 21 million Bitcoin. There's actually less. But it is entirely predictable. There can never be more Bitcoin than what there is. Okay, and no central entity could ever create any more. But the reality is, when it comes to gold, the amount of gold in the universe is truly unknowable. The amount of gold in the earth has only been speculated about. There is no hard evidence. So it's not a hard meter stick of this is the only gold that we have. No, the meter stick that we use is how much gold we mine each year in relation to the existing supply of gold that has been mined. So this is also a moving meter stick. Anyways, my point is that Bitcoin is better gold. And I think that Nayib Bukele is playing some 5D chess here. And I think that that's why he put out that gold news to kind of shake the tree, see what happens. And you know what? I'm going to say it. I do believe, or I want to believe, that he is playing 5D chess and is going to use the IMF's debt facility specifically for purchasing Bitcoin. Now, for the people who don't understand what the IMF does, right, they issue something called SDRs, which are called special drawing rights. I've talked about this quite often in the past. It is essentially money out of thin air, right? If you go look it up on the IMF website, they will give you, there is a very long, detailed description about the basket of assets and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, they are creating money out of thin air. And this is money that can only, which is interesting, it can only be issued to countries, okay? And essentially the country can pay the IMF back in this currency. But let's say Nayib Bukele, right? He were to grab these SDRs and try to go to a store with them. There's no going to a store with an SDR. This is like government level money, right? And even beyond that, this is like some weird NGO organization slave money, country enslavement money. Anyways, my whole point is that it is complete nonsense. This is one of the many, well, I shouldn't say many, but this is one of the very powerful debt facilities in the world. And essentially, once you are in debt to the IMF, it is incredibly, incredibly difficult to get out of it. The country with the biggest debt right now to the IMF is Argentina. Okay, let's just take that for example. Okay, and Argentina's 2024 projected inflation is at 229%. Keep in mind, in 2023, it was 133.49%. Now, of course, you could say, well, Phil, that's not necessarily related. Go take a look at the other countries that the IMF has bailed out and take a look at their inflation rates, okay? This is what free money does. This is nothing but enslavement. And the funny thing is this, okay? The IMF website touts that the countries that have successfully repaid the IMF loans have returned to health, okay? I'm still looking for that list of countries, but they keep saying it over and over again. Or I should say it's written over and over again, and it reminds me of the illusory truth effect, which is if you read something enough times, you'll start to believe that it's true. And that's essentially, I think that this is what the IMF does. Anyways, yeah, guys, I do think that he is. I think that Nayib Bukele is playing 5D chess, 6D chess, whatever D chess you want. I think he is going to use the Michael Saylor playbook, and he is going to essentially borrow this money from the IMF, and he's going to buy Bitcoin with it. All right, guys, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I'll catch you tomorrow.